Good evening. Welcome to the City of Hagerstown Planning Commission meeting of October 27th. The commissioners with me tonight are all present, and on my left is Chris Davis, far right is Ron Thomas, and then to my immediate right, Jim Stone. My name is Doug Wright. Staff's in the room is Kathy Marr, who's Director of Code Enforcement and Planning, and Steve Bachmiller, who is a zoning administrator and plan review specialist. And we also have Amy Hawk, who is our secretary, and we're glad to, oh, and Megan Flick, I'm sorry, our city planner, back in the back too. All righty. First item on the agenda is we have no minutes to review tonight. So we're going to a development review, the Reese Farm subdivision.
Okay, we have Dave Lyles and Dave Trostel here to discuss this with you. We met with them last week regarding the potential development of the Reese Farm. This is the property that's owned to RH, located down between Heb and Emmerich Road. They have some ideas for a design for the development based on the unique circumstances of the layout of the property, its topography, its location in relationship to other city development and what's surrounding it. It's a proposal for a garage townhouse design that is not a traditional neighborhood design. It does not use alleys. It has front load garages with driveways. The driveways would be 2 vehicles in length. And given the circumstances, and basically I'm summarizing the memo that I provided in your packet, given all of those circumstances in this particular case, this is a site that pushing traditional neighborhood design is probably not that big of a deal because it's surrounded by very large lots outside of the municipality lots that kind of actually be out of place in this location, and between the issues associated with connecting it to the sewer system and also the topography of the site. This is one where a more contemporary arrangement may not necessarily be such a bad thing. Staff's only concern is you all know the history that we had in the recent past with the development of garage townhouses and parking issues associated with it. So as long as that issue can be addressed sufficiently, staff doesn't have any particular issue with this, but nonetheless, we suggested that they come and discuss it with you before they start moving forward with design.
There has been discussion in the past of a possible road through here. Is that still on the table?
According to the city engineer, that still needs to be studied with the traffic study. That will be a part of this project, with and without it.
So if they do, then that'll have to go through that intersection there closest to Beaver Creek Road.
I think it's more a matter of whether the connection occurs up here by the stormwater pond to get to Heb. Otherwise, it would be an island of a road.
Gonna have to be there, doesn't it?
That's what's going to be studied in the traffic study. The
So-
impact that it has with and without.
This is just a consultation. The consultation is not really, I mean, this is a plan, yes, but it might well see a dramatic change when there's a traffic study.
There's no official proposal at this point. It's just
Right.
we've got an idea. What do you think?
And are you okay with not having alleys?
I think your summary about it's not that large of a development. That'd be tough to get things going. You know, generally those that we have seen are much larger developments that can sustain all that development with the alleys.
Generally, yes. I mean, in theory, under other circumstances, a property this size could be done with alleys. However, the site is quite rolling. A lot of topography on the situation. If you look at the surrounding properties on the drawing that provided to you, the surrounding properties are all quite large and most likely configured in such a way where they're not going to subdivide. So it would actually be rather out of character with everything in the immediate vicinity around it.
It's just not enough, it's not big enough to create its own character.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
What's the total acreage of the site?
31.
31.
What are your all thoughts on the general sense? Particularly, I guess 2-car length driveways, which does meet the city's requirement for 2 outside off-street parking lots, spaces for 2 cars. Hopefully that means that they won't be blocking sidewalks. And
And in the packet, I do have a blow up of what one of the lots will look like.
this green thing,
So it does show 2 cars fitting in the driveway. Also, there's 1 free parking in the parking lot. So we meet the 3 car planning and 1 for engineering. Parking requirements, the whole development, 3 spaces per unit.
so all these lots would have pretty much the same depth to accomplish this everywhere throughout.
And just point out that the architectural rendering appears to show 2-car wide driveways, but I'm guessing this is just sample type stuff of the architecture. It doesn't necessarily reflect what will be on the ground. The picture of these with a 1-car wide driveway leading up to the garage, not the.
A little more grass.
Yeah, a bit more grass.
We talked about reducing the number of townhouses in a row.
That is something that's up for discussion. But as of right now, I don't think there's more than,
There's 6. A
Yeah,
couple of these
6.
have 6, and I know we're talking about 5.
and actually, if I remember correctly, the current 8, it only applies to cluster subdivisions. I don't think there's a limit on the number of townhouses in a standard non-cluster subdivision. I'll have to double check that. But also, that issue of reducing the number of units is becoming, sounds like it's becoming less of an issue. We'll be talking about that when we talk about the text amendments, because we had a meeting with several department heads, including the fire marshal, who was pushing that issue, the fire chief. And as the conversation has worked its way out, it seems like it's becoming less of a potential issue. So maybe it'd be okay to leave it as it is.
Thank you.
It looks to me like he's got several well-placed sort of extra lots, which I think it's a reasonable solution, take care of cases where people have parties, that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. Those lots.
Mhm.
I thought you were talking about tot lots.
No,
Parking lots.
extra parking lot, yeah.
So when we reviewed this plan with them the other day, the only other comment that I had in this particular situation, it's probably not that big of a deal, is the open space is very internal to the site. It's surrounded by people's backyards. But unless the collector road ends up going through there, this is all going to be a relatively self-contained development. So it's not like it's going to get a lot of drive-by traffic like some designs of some other pending subdivisions may. So it's probably not that big of a deal. We did get them, the version that we saw last week had the parking lot that's across from the open space, actually in this open space area. So this open space would have been surrounded by everybody's backyards plus 2 parking lots. We asked them to move the parking lot over onto the other side of the street. That way, at least this open space will have some street frontage, some street visibility, and they agreed to do that. So that's a change to this plan compared to what we initially saw.
And also one thing to point out, Steve, zoned, high density residential.
Yes,
So it could be, home apartment, miles,
yes, it is zoned RH. Apartments will be permitted. And even at the density here is not so much that it even triggers requirements for open space. But this parking lot here was moved here from this spot. When we looked at it initially, you had, this is your primary subdivision open space, backyards, garden sheds, et cetera, here and here, and then two parking lots. There was no real good direct visibility, and they've addressed that in this particular design. And again, if you look at the street layout, you're not going to get, if this stays, if the regional road doesn't go through there, you're not going to get pass-through traffic within this development. So it's not, the visibility of the open space is not that big of an issue in this design.
Well, if you're asking whether any of us have any problems with the concept, I don't have any problem with it.
we've actually been to staff twice on this, and before we go into full kind of study that engineering design, we look for it. To find that information, to do an offer.
I agree with Jim's statement. I sure be hoping we can get that road through there. Chris?
I have no other issues.
Okay. Ron? I guess you got it. Yeah.
Outside your district, that's going to involve a lot of significant amount of redesign.
Well, there's lots of other problems. Funkstown has already authorized this. Yeah, if they got to curb it through to get it over here. Funkstown didn't even know about the possibility of that road.
Most times, kind of proposed possibility of
They
connecting everything out there.
They did.
Well, you can do it.
I did. Yep, and it was supposed to relieve traffic in our town.
Yep. No.
Okay. The hot topic.
Everybody's favorite thing to talk about.
Everybody.
And for the record, each one of these reports has in red, just below the header, the date.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Just to refresh everybody on the process, basically we do this in 3 steps. One is we throw basically every idea that comes up in the previous year to you in a less formal format. That was done over 2 meetings, including a special meeting last week. Now what we are here is basically your official submission. This is what we think ought to move forward. So what you're looking to do here today is go over to make sure any changes that you wanted from the last 2 meetings are made. If you have anything new, you can bring them up. But this is basically the official, this is what we're looking to review and take the public meeting.
One possible exception. We have a meeting tomorrow, staff does, with 3 members of the Homeless Coalition to talk about the homeless text, and we'll bring back any input that we get from them.
All right, we'll at least do our due diligence tonight. I'll lead this if you don't mind,
That's fine.
and we'll just go issue by issue. We've already been over it 3 times. And if anybody wants any changes, speak now or wait till next time.
And then the next meeting on November 10th, you'll be going over to make sure any changes that are wanted were made here or that were wanted here are made. And if everything is okay, then you'll be voting at your next meeting to take it to public meeting, which would be held in early December.
Okay.
And Steve, are there any changes in here based on the meeting with the directors?
Yeah, there's a few to get down to there, and signage is one of them. But we can get there one at a time.
I missed the last meeting, so I don't know if this was discussed then, but I really think that I have no problem with having, homeless shelters as a zoning category. But I think it ought to be a special exception in the downtown district too. Because that's where most of them are. And are likely to be, because that's where the problem is.
Y'all want to address that?
Not really. The downtown district is where we're trying to promote economic redevelopment and tourism, entertainment venues. Is that consistent with the direction that the city is trying to push the downtown?
So we already have one homeless shelter right in the downtown. I don't know how many we want to concentrate.
Right on the
downtown.
square, isn't it?
No, it's,
The Reach shelter is in the downtown.
well, there's several churches, at least one church that comes to my mind, that's the Otterbein United Methodist on Franklin and Locust, that's in the downtown. And I'm sure there are more that operate homeless shelters.
And you have a cold shelter there off of Locust.
This text also, I don't know if you noticed it, Jim, but it codifies the interpretation that we currently have, which allows the barrack-style homeless shelters as an accessory use to a religious sanctuary, which is how Reach is permitted, because it's on the same property, an accessory to Christ Reformed Church.
So you're saying that if you're a church and want to operate a homeless shelter, you don't,
We currently allow it now.
Yeah.
If you're on site with your sanctuary and it's accessory to your sanctuary.
and that's
That's
gonna-
really the only way we permit it now.
and that's going to continue to be allowed.
What would be new here is the idea of allowing them as special exceptions in these 4 non-residential districts as a standalone enterprise, not as accessory to a sanctuary.
I see your point, and I did not think about that. I think that makes a sense. I mean, my thought was, heck, most of them, I mean, you gotta have homeless shelters where the homeless people are. And mostly, I mean, I agree, it's not consistent with the image, but we have the problem, we have the problem. But anyway, I think your explanation, I don't have any objection.
Okay.
I do have a question about terminology, the word homeless versus unhoused. Can you check with the group and see how they prefer?
Okay, although they call themselves the Homeless Coalition.
Well, and that's a longstanding name, I'm sure, but I'm seeing when you're referring to this population, a change in the terminology.
I'll bring that up tomorrow.
Any input on this one on page 1?
Yeah,
Hmm?
where do we draw the line to downtown? Well, I'm thinking of the square, and then we move out from there. And a block and a half, you run off of, I think it's Franklin Street. There's the church, and then next to them, I think that's the cold weather shelter.
That's downtown. The downtown is the CCMU zoning district,
Okay,
and so it runs from Burhan's on the west side.
okay.
Shannon
okay.
on the east
You
side.
answered my question.
Okay.
I was looking at Locust, not Locust, what's that? Yeah, that's Locust Street there.
It's like 3 blocks in any direction in square.
It kind of, going north and south, it's a little different. It's not completely.
It's
a
not completely
rectangle.
square, but I was thinking of the street right up from the cold weather shelter as being the boundary on the west. And
It goes a little further west than that.
yeah, well, you just said, when you said
Yeah.
Burhan's Boulevard, and then south, I was looking at, I always get Antietam and
Baltimore comes first.
Baltimore, okay, Antietam as the boundary there. And then, what's the street before Mulberry?
Locust.
Locust as the boundary on the
On
east.
Potomac, the CCMU goes down to Baltimore, but it doesn't go all the way across parallel with Washington. It jags up,
Okay,
and it's like above Antietam on the east side. Yeah,
okay,
and same thing going north. It goes up further up Potomac than it does up Locust and Mulberry.
okay.
Ready to move on? Or you still want,
No,
do it? No, I don't want you to push it.
I'm just thinking that, when we, rezone the area downtown for some of the, businesses to get that element out of the downtown, now we, have to think about it.
It'll come back again.
Yeah.
We don't have access to hard copies of the zoning map, do we?
Could put it up on the TV, but no.
Not hard copies. But you can also look at on the web. If you go City of Hagerstown's site, you can find the zoning map.
Megan's doing it now. So.
But if you want to study it later, also.
Megan has Zoom capability.
Oh, that's an old term.
Enlarge.
Great when it works.
Yeah. That's what I used to tell the guys.
Oop.
Oh,
That tells a lot.
Yeah.
Can you zoom in on the CCMU?
getting there.
That's okay, I can find it. I can find it.
That's a webpage.
Yeah, sometimes web pages don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to download
Oh,
mine.
there
Oh,
we
there you go.
Okay,
There you go.
all right.
That aqua color. It goes all the way to Cannon.
Mhm.
And all the way to Burhan Boulevard.
Or almost. Just
The
on
railroad.
the side of Walnut.
The railroad overpass.
Railroad overpass.
Okay, that's.
That's CG on Burhan's.
So it's the green, well, I call it, green, looks like
Mhm.
all of the green is considered downtown.
Mhm.
That is a large area than I thought.
Yeah, the green is the CCMU, the real commercial core of the downtown is a little smaller than the
Yeah.
whole green. But that's the downtown zoning is the green.
So I guess I'm thinking of the downtown green where the hash mark is being the downtown.
The hash mark is the historic
Historic.
district.
Okay, that was more of the area I was looking at, except for the east there. I thought it would, when it, one block further east, but the north and south and the west was just about right.
Yeah, the
Okay,
historic
Okay.
district is overlaid the more commercial character of the downtown.
Well, the next page is numbered page 1 also. So I can't do that.
If you look at the top left corner.
Yeah, that's it, top left corner,
Oh,
202104.
Under the staple.
It's not that much.
yeah, this, 2021-03.
This mainly is allowing mini storage in Palm District, specifically. The request was Pangborn property. Okay, there, everybody?
I don't think you had any changes.
No, we didn't. Next one is 202105. It's also on page 1. And this one is it's some additions to conversion district overlay, and it is addressing some possibilities at Surrey Elementary, as well as others.
Which I think is a really cool concept. I hope.
Yeah, I know. We all okay with that?
Yes.
I don't think there was any changes.
No.
Requested at the last meeting either on that.
Next one is 202106. And here we is in burial sites and required research. All okay with that one?
Yes.
The only thing that gets me is that the two things that could be required, that's going and trying to go back and search ownership and so forth. And the other thing was, I know doing a cursory walk by and everything, you know, ground differences and so forth, but, you know, requiring, if necessary, ground penetration, that gets pretty expensive.
Actually, the only thing that's changing here is instructing the developers how to package the material. The requirements for doing cemetery research have been on the books for years.
Yeah.
It's mostly been geared toward our large greenfield sites, especially ones around the edges of the cities that may have had farm cemeteries on them.
Sure.
But the regulations have probably been on the books for 7 years or so now. I think we adopted them around 2014. And basically, we expect them to do their due diligence to find out. And that typically would be a deed search and stuff. And it talks about a little bit about if there is evidence that you might want to do things like that. But I just want to be clear that the things that you mentioned are essentially already in the ordinance.
Yeah, I know, and I think I mentioned something about it back then, I don't remember. But the reason why I said it is because, and this is just my own personal, I had to do that when I was working for the utility. And I don't know how many times I went through and I found a 200-acre farm, and the parents had given their kids, you know, an acre here, an acre there, an acre there, and never changed the original deed. And it created one heck of a mess.
Right.
That's the only thing I was getting at.
The provision that you referred to that talks about ground penetrating radar, that is basically if they find, if somebody goes out, if they do their due diligence, they find evidence.
Okay.
Either through the deeds, field recon, that there's something out there.
I got
maybe
you.
a cemetery here. Ground penetrating radar will help determine the extent of that cemetery.
Right.
We don't expect anybody to go out and do ground penetrating radar if there's no real either documentary or physical evidence on the surface. All that would be doing is setting what the boundaries are as part of the development process. And this is actually rather timely because at your next meeting, we most likely will receive the sketch plan for ESD for the Harrison tract. And there was some talk about possibility of a cemetery or two being on that property. So in our conversations with the developer and with their engineer, they were trying to work their way through asking us, well, what is it that you want? What is it that you need? And that's what really generated this, is we really didn't have anything in the code that says how to package the material that we're already requesting. That's all this is. It's just how to put it into place.
And actually, this -06 has other in that same package. So we have first the burial sites. Next, we have require large and small group homes, being parking requirements and neighborhood mixed use and CC mixed use. And we've been over that many times. Then there's a third change, clarifying side setbacks for
Townhouses.
with decks
Semi-detached.
on townhomes. And then the fourth change was, and then more information required of the certified surveyor. Fifth change, eliminating a previous requirement about location and city tax maps, no longer needed. Sixth change, nursing law, damage, non-conformities. This isn't somebody who has, well, you go ahead. The structure that's been, is going to be rehabbed under non-conformity, but the owner drags his feet on getting it done.
Yeah, the particular situation that generated this is you had a non-conforming use that was heavily damaged by fire. There is a provision in the ordinance that says that you can reestablish them under certain parameters, but we found that there was kind of a hole in those parameters that doesn't necessarily force or require or even encourage the property owner to, once they met those basic notification requirements, to move with diligence. So what this does is it basically tells them that, okay, you've given us notice that you're going to reestablish it. Now go get your building permits, and your building permits are good for a certain amount of time. And if you let your building permits lapse, then you're done.
We've looked at that a number of times.
Yes.
You're okay?
Yeah.
Everybody?
How many times can they be removed?
You can renew a building permit. Building permit is good for 6 months.
Yep. we can use-
Right, but there's a parenthetical expression here. Valid for 6 months and may be renewed, paren, a certain number here.
It can be renewed once, and then I think after that, it comes down to whether or not the building code has changed.
You see what
As to
Jim's
whether it can
referring-
renew a second time.
Right above change 7.
I believe that's how it works right now.
So you can only renew it once?
Using the same code that you submitted under, but you have it for 6 months, then you can request for another 6 months. I don't think you can automatically renew a second time if the building code has changed since you first applied. You'd have to make the project meet the current code. I believe that's how it works,
You can't ride on the old code, is what you're
not
saying.
indefinitely.
So if you have a project, for example, that takes a year to do, the person that has a permit isn't gonna be assured that he
The
can.
permit stays active as long as you're working and having inspections.
Oh,
It's
okay.
only if nothing has happened for 6 months that things
Then
expire.
it lapses. Okay, got it.
Okay.
So what ends up happening is that you've got to be under construction within a year, because it says that you have to notify our office within 6 months of your intention to reestablish it. And then you had to be under construction within a year. Under construction assumes that you're going to have your building permit. Building permit's going to be valid for 6 months. You can renew it once for another 6 months. So essentially, you have to be under heavy construction and essentially done if it rolls over.
Okay, but I get the fact that,
Gives you 2 years.
well,
It could be longer if.
It could be
that
longer,
first
but-
permit is still valid because you're continuing to work.
That is correct.
right. Okay, I think that's fair.
We just have a lot of permits that get issued and then nothing happens.
Right.
And so then we send them a notice, 6 months is almost up. Do you want to renew this permit or not? Or do we close it out? Well, that happens quite a bit. People
Hmm.
think they're gonna do something and then for whatever reason, it doesn't happen.
Moving on, change number 7, changes some maximum heights
Yeah.
in the neighborhood mixed use and CC mixed use. We've been over that a couple times.
By the way, have you seen the framing going up for the Dollar General?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
It looks different than I figured.
Really?
yeah.
It doesn't have its skin.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the size. I expected the footprint to be bigger for some reason.
Change number 8, this is making it a little bit harder for someone who wants to demolish a structure in a historic district. Is that right? Is that what I have that?
And I also provided at the end of this section, language from both Cumberland's and Gaithersburg's ordinances dealing with this. Theirs is a little bit more wordy. I tried to keep ours as concise as possible, but essentially says roughly the same thing. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're being consistent with other municipalities.
Yeah, we've been over that. Change number 9. This is a recent development. This has been what to do with the sketch plan.
Yeah. Yes.
Define it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And this is new wording.
Jim, you might not have seen this. You weren't here when we discussed this.
No, but I know that we've had an issue come up
Yeah,
again and again, is what does this sketch plan really mean?
right. And what are the actions we can take?
Right.
So they expanded number 1 in particular since the last time we saw it.
On page 6, up at the top, the third line down, did you intend to have 2 approves there? Says the planning commission shall approve, approve with.
Approve with conditions.
Okay,
They're 3 different things.
What am I missing?
Third line.
the
down.
third line down, the last sentence says the
Oh,
planning
okay.
commission shall approve, approve with conditions.
Or disapprove.
Or just,
Did we-
Or just.
yeah, 3 options.
Okay.
Approve with,
Conditions or disapprove.
And that's the existing language.
Okay. I just saw the double approve in there, and I just wanted to make sure it was supposed to be there.
change number 10 addresses additional parking requirements for very large buildings when the expansion is under 35% of the original building. Again, we've seen that. Change number 11. Landscaping on very, very large buildings.
This is new wording.
Yes,
Yes.
go ahead.
Okay, this was brought up by a member of the city council in passing regarding how to better address the appearance of these huge buildings that the city is getting proposals for as they're viewed from public streets, given their mass. Problem is that each property is really kind of different. And then the question also became, how big is too big and when should some additional requirement apply? At our last meeting, we provided you all with some numbers giving the lengths of such large buildings in and out of the city. And based on comparing the various examples, you all thought that a building that's at least 750 feet in length, this should apply to. And basically what it does is it puts them on notice that just basic compliance with the current landscaping requirements for a building over that size is not enough. And then as part of the sketch planning process, they have to come in and propose how they plan to provide additional buffering on buildings longer than 750 feet as they front on a public street for this body to approve as part of the sketch plan process.
Having heard a lot of people criticize all these warehouses are going up on Brand Boulevard. I wonder if maybe some of the effect of that might be mitigated. If they could basically do with their facades what a lot of shopping centers do. I mean, they actually set sections of it in a little bit or out a little bit so that it doesn't have, it tends to interrupt the feeling that it's a continuity that's unending.
We thought about that and we projected what the reaction would be to the development by the development community, that by the nature of how those businesses operate and how their floors are laid out and all doing architectural articulation to those buildings would probably be a very hard sell to have those types of projects in the city. I think they would probably walk from city locations because you just don't see that anywhere when buildings that size. So we thought the best way to handle it is through landscaping. And this is limited, by the way, to along public streets. The existing landscaping requirements for adjacent properties and for adjacent residential still come into play. You still have your building setback requirements. But we're addressing here the specific comment about what's it look like from streets. When it comes to how these are treated in the region, I think our existing regulations are probably the best around, probably still not sufficient, but probably the best around because I drive up and down Route 81 and across the 3-state area, various jurisdictions. And by far our landscaping of these things is better than anything I've seen anywhere up or down 81. And I think part of the problem is new development always takes time for landscaping to fill in. If you notice, there are street trees and stuff along Basil Boulevard that were put in for that development, but they're all, let's face it, they're 12-foot tall sticks at this point. We really won't get a good feel on how effective that is for probably another 5 or 7 years down the road until those trees have a chance to mature. And another example of that too is the building that's if you're heading toward the mall on the left side, the one that's closest to the city, the first one that you come to. The second one is the huge Amazon building, is the one before it. If you remember when we approved the site plan on that, we actually approved 2 rows of street trees, which ultimately, when they fill out, will provide additional buffering. So it's just, unfortunately, it's that we're in that bad position of the development's so new, we really don't have a good feel of how the landscaping ultimately will play out. So this provides you leverage and latitude in having a discussion with the developer, being flexible with them, but demanding, something more than what the ordinance currently requires. And
it leaves it up to them to come up with a plan.
It leaves it up, yes, and it leaves it up to them to come up with a plan, puts them on notice. And I'll kind of give you another similar example is the Lowe's Distribution Center. The Lowe's Distribution Center was put in 2008-ish or so, something like that. And we received complaints for years about the buffering along Basil Boulevard being insufficient. And that was a combination of 2 things: poor soil, the stuff grew slowly, and 2, just basically time. It takes time for landscaping to grow up to buffer such a huge and intense use. But now if you look at it, it's got some holes here and there, but for the most part, 15 years later, it's doing its job. So
I think also it has an issue with what you've been used to looking at. Because being from Washington, I see big buildings. I've seen big buildings ever since my mother dragged me downtown to go shopping. And when I come up here and see people complaining about big buildings, I said, go watch the Pentagon.
yeah, that's kind of I hate to use the term catch-22, but for lack of better words, I guess it applies, is people look at a building like that and they feel because we haven't had anything like that in our community before that it's out of scale.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we're an urban environment, we're a city where everything is supposed to be tight, packed, and big.
Sure.
So it's kind of where are you?
And after all, that land is long been zoned industrial.
Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe it was nice when it didn't have anything but trees, but I mean, people who expected it to always be that way, just, you know.
But you
As
know,
far as an articulated look, they could do that with paint, and I think they did do that on the Amazon.
Yeah. But I see your point. I was picturing loading docks and all that. Yeah, I don't think that would work.
but like I say, you know, walking down Pennsylvania Avenue, all the government buildings down there, the Smithsonian, everything, you know, I'm used to seeing huge buildings.
Baltimore's the same way. I mean, you
Yeah.
have buildings that run an entire length of the city block,
Sure,
breweries
sure.
and factories and warehouses and such.
Absolutely.
So the rest of us seen this before, talked about this before. You okay with this, Jim?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
750.
Yep.
And we also talk about berms.
Yes.
Yes.
They're encouraged. We could also put sidewalks through.
That's been another.
That had been a great improvement out there. Okay. So the next up is Cumberland. And this is actually going back
Supporting
to
information,
for the,
previous thing.
yeah. So I'm moving on to, unless anybody wants to go back, 2021-07.
Hold on.
Change number 1 is page 4-17.
Yes.
It's page 1.
Oh, yeah, it's
Another
page,
page.
Again,
page 1 in your pen.
Okay.
Okay.
Setback.
My thing about L,
you wanted a definition?
let me suggest this. I'll start at the beginning. Oh, L, in addition to an existing building or
Mhm.
element of a new building increase. I didn't catch definition. Okay, L. L-shaped in all right, never mind. Scratch all my comments.
And I took that from a dictionary of architectural terms.
Okay.
So
All right. Didn't make it up, huh?
I did not make it up. No.
All
I
right.
didn't pull it out of my ear.
All right, this is the section where we're asking developers that they need to do a better job to, what's the term?
Do traditional subdivision
Traditional.
design.
Traditional with alleys, et cetera. We're strengthening the wording. And we've been over this more than once.
I mean, which
Where you at?
number is this?
This is starting at 2021-07, and there's a series of changes all directed to the same.
Okay.
Jim, in the top left corner of the form is your number,
I got it.
2107.
I do have a comment. I don't think it's addressed in here because it's street regulation, but I heard there was discussion, I think that which Jim Bender was here. We talked about widths of streets and alleys. I think that if we make 50 feet as our street width and 20 feet as our alley, we're going to have so much impervious surface that one of the principal benefits of having garages in the back and all that is going to be lost by just creating more and more concrete, or not concrete, but macadam. And I think if we're going to encourage traditional neighborhood type developments, we ought to specifically move for narrow streets and certainly narrow alleys. I mean, if you look at how the city's laid out now, there's no place where you find 20-foot alleys. Well, I can think of.
But we're gonna have, possibly next week,
Mhm.
gonna, get a fire truck or two out in just a couple situations in the evening hours when people are home to see how easy it is for them to maneuver and set up, so we can get a sense of how narrow can we make the streets and still function
Well,
for that.
but isn't the answer to that is they've been doing it for years. I mean, the terrace, for example, where I live, it's not wide enough for two, if there's a car parked on each side of the street, it's not wide enough for two cars to pass. One will have to wait while the other goes. I'm guessing that the actual paved surface is maybe 30 feet. Well,
The terrace,
it's, huh?
the terrace?
Yeah.
Hers is pretty wide.
No, it's not really.
No, not
Compared to
down.
Hamilton, I mean, it's much narrower.
Fire trucks have never had a problem and never will because they'll always find a way to get around. I mean, ideally, fire department would probably like to have streets 100 foot wide, like
No,
Maryland Avenue.
the fire chief is very reasonable about this. Doug was present at the meeting. But we're gonna get a real world examples, take them out. I'm not exactly sure which developments that they want to take it out, but we're gonna go with the city engineer, the fire chief and us. They're gonna bring out a couple of different size vehicles, I think, and just see how, because we're talking about other things in here to see if they can do the maneuvering. And just how narrow down we can get it and they still feel comfortable and we can still meet our goals for this.
It's not just getting down the road the fire truck has to worry about. It has to get its outriggers out.
Yeah. And it's on-
I've seen them. They put their outriggers on the sidewalk if they have to.
They will.
That was part of the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to, I'm not insensitive to their comments, but this city is full of narrow streets. And I've never heard of a fire not addressed because the fire trucks couldn't get there.
And we're going to be looking at those numbers closely, and we're going to make sure that they get adopted at the smallest number practicable.
At least for these new type, I'm thinking mainly of where we want to try to encourage people to do traditional neighborhoods.
Well, to be perfectly honest, the trucks are actually smaller now than they used to be because a 100-foot ladder truck used to be a hook and ladder truck with a tender on the back. Now it's a single body truck.
Oh, no. We got two of them in the city.
Well, I mean, but I'm saying they do have a 100-foot ladder truck that's a single body.
Yeah,
The ones in the city, there's a.
Yeah, I know they are, but what I'm saying.
They're all
is
brand new. They're all brand new.
Yeah, the new ones.
They're all brand new.
They are.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
they're $1 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
but here's the situation. The subdivision sets a plat up with 60-foot streets. But what they do is they only pave 40 foot.
Sure.
And that's where the problem is. They only pave, they don't pave the, in other words, they don't use the whole street, the right of way. So that's where
you got water, you've got sewer,
Mhm.
you've got communications, and fiber,
Yes.
and all that's got to get in that extra footed, as well as sidewalks
But
and,
here's the thing.
and street trees.
Here's the thing. Water and sewer are usually the only ones that go in the actual road right of way. Utilities go in a foot off of the right of way. I know because I designed them. And that's the way it is. If you go by my house, the transformer sits about 5 feet back from the edge of where the macadam on the road is, because that's where the edge of the right of way is. A foot. What we do is we put that piece of equipment 1 foot outside of the road right of way. So what you're looking at is you have the space there, but they don't build out to it. And then what happens is, as that development matures, everybody thinks, well, what are they doing that for? But they don't realize that the right of way, the road right of way, is another 5 feet. Because I remember when they went through and moved my mailbox back because they widened the road on my street.
Well, I was talking not so much about right of ways, but what the paved surface is, because that's what you see. And also, I think, we're trying to reduce impervious surfaces where we can. And so,
We're aware of that. It's just we don't have the final numbers yet. I think everybody up here, down here at the staff level, don't want to overdevelop pavement any more than absolutely necessary. In some circumstances, it may be. For example, when we're talking about having some lots that front into an open space and the only actual pavement adjacent to them is the alley, we're talking about having a couple extra feet on those particular alleys to make sure that the fire equipment is able to be accommodated in the rear.
I think in those cases, yes, but in the normal case, our trucks don't need to get in the alleys. And, again, if you look at the city, I doubt that there's, 10 width, there are some that are narrower even than 10 feet, but 10 feet is what I would say is typical.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you could just barely get a car through some of them.
And right now, the number that we've been using all along since we went up to Walden and still seems to be the standard that we're talking about is 16. So you're talking to go to two-way traffic going up to 16 feet wide.
I really think we don't need two-way traffic in alleys. What happens now on most alleys is not all that well traveled. If in the rare case, one person comes in, the other people figure it out, one moves over, one goes around.
Well, we're asking for front back loading. So there's many more vehicles going to be in the alleys than in the front. And we're also hoping to collect trash and garbage from the back instead of the front.
All right.
I've lived with that all my life.
So we need more space for that back there.
And
Well,
Maybe,
if you're talking about trash collection, yeah, I'll give you that.
but
I mean, we're going to be looking to try make sure it's as narrow as we can get away with. The part of it too is the narrower you make it, then you start, if it's a curved alley because of the layout of the lots, then you get into turning radii and things like that as well.
Yeah.
So that's all, we're all still in the process of working that out.
I have one where I live where it's about as sharp a turn as you can imagine. And the city light truck has to get in there because there's a transformer on the point, and they figure it out. I imagine they have to do some maneuvering to get there, but they do.
What's the general opinion of this body as far as two-way alleys?
Well,
We're hearing it.
I don't see it.
Well, we
I
had
can
talked,
tell you that those.
Even if it's one
guys-
way, it's going to need to be wider than the 10 feet that we're doing now in order for pumpers and trash trucks to use.
I think people should be permitted to go either way. That doesn't mean that the alley has to permit cars to cross. 10 foot, whatever you end up with, if it's 16 feet, that should not be a one-way alley.
A 16 feet wouldn't be a one-way alley. It would be a two-way alley.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be big enough that cars can go past each other at 30 miles an
Oh,
hour.
no, we don't want that.
no,
No, it's 16 feet wide. That gives you 8 foot per vehicle. If each one is taking their half of the alley width. And at that narrow, those cars going to be passing at 5 miles an hour, not 30.
Right.
And in some cases,
This is based on the examples that we saw up at Walden. We actually got out a tape measure and measured the width of those alleys, and everybody was comfortable with that.
yes.
and in some cases, when they come in a situation like that, one of them pulls over as far as he can get to the one side to let the other one go by.
Well, we also want to take into account too, the long-term maintainability, for lack of better words, durability of these alleys if they're going to be built. Because if you pull all the way over to one side when you really only have enough width for a car, you're pulling into somebody's backyard at that point, or you're pulling into the couple feet of grass that might be in the alley right away that people were living there still maintaining out to the alley. Might technically be alley right away, but now you're talking about driving in the grass.
Well,
I guess I'm going on, where I live, that they have fences all the way up and down the alley. So you pull up close to the fence, and on the opposite side, that they have rear garages. And because the streets like that, and people will pull over in those pull-ins, and they figure it out.
Well, if you remember the examples up in Walden where
Yes.
people did have some people did have fences in their backyards.
Yes.
Single family home areas.
Yeah.
And it went up to what we presume to be the alley right of way.
Yes.
There was still about this much grass outside of that alley or outside of that fence because it's alley right of way. but not improved alley, kind of like what we have with the street right away. Your street is not the full width of the street.
Well, that's
right-of-way.
that's what I was getting at, yes.
But what you don't want is you don't want people pulling onto that grass to let people get by, because then you're going to deteriorate the quality of your
Yes,
development
I
pretty
understand.
quick.
I
So,
understand.
but I'm sure that happens a lot, particularly in the alleys that we have, because they're just narrow. I mean, they're not.
Oh, it happens to me every night. Actually, that I would say maybe multiple times an hour in my backyard. We are constantly maintaining a driveway. Chris, you've been trying to get a word in.
Well, I mean, my alley is barely passable for one car. And if we meet, one of us has to back out in the
Yeah.
street, basically.
Yeah.
I don't want to see us perpetuate that someplace else.
Or you have to pull on somebody's land to let that other car go.
Well,
by.
and we don't, because our fences are right up on the paving.
That's true in Jim's alley, it's true in my alley.
But
Got
I take the point, Chris. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we got back around to keeping these dimensions for the time being. Okay. Have I covered that as well? Anything else anybody wants to discuss in this section? There are other things, but all address the same issue.
But 07.
07.
There is some new formatting here on page 1. If you remember the
Page 1.
which page?
page 1 of section 2021-07.
Oh,
If you remember in your first package, the first 3 items that were listed as discussion items, not without actual proposed language, because we said that it's basically tweaks to the setback chart, which was already extremely cramped. So I needed to figure out a way to make it work. And that was basically allowing homes that have an alley to have that rear L where the one-story garage addition can be closer to the alley. And what we're doing is we're handling it as a note. Under the rear yard depth, there'll be these asterisks and see subsection D5. This is the section that allows decks to go a certain distance into the rear yard, front porches to go certain distances in the front yard. This will create a new section that allows one-story garage additions attached to the house to be within as close as 20 feet to the rear property line without a variance. And then you have the certain criteria A through D, which are all based on unique set of circumstances associated with new traditional neighborhood subdivisions. Rear property line adjoins an improved alley constructed pursuant to an approved development plan. The portion of the building between the codified rear setback and the point 20 feet from the rear property line shall be limited to a one-story L, so you can't do 2 stories, and containing a garage oriented and connected by a driveway to the alley. And C, the L shall be no wider than 50% of the width of the lot at the location it's placed on the lot. So if you have a 50-foot wide minimum lot, your garage isn't going to be more than 25 feet wide. It helps preserve some remaining backyard space. And also it doesn't allow the Board of Zoning Appeals to grant variances to it, because you're really starting to push the use of your backyard at that point.
So we have seen this before. We saw
You saw it as commentary. It was all in blue on the last one, but I didn't have a specific layout set for it.
Okay. I think it's wise for me to turn over this to you for the rest of the discussion, because I blew right by that, so.
That's the way if I screw up, right?
That's right.
Number 2.
Number 2. This is, let me see, what did I write? At a provision, the accessory chart setback that permits attached in traditional design subdivisions. This will allow what we saw up in Walden, where you have townhouses and they have detached garages along the alley that are attached to garages next to them, creating basically these courtyard backyards where you walk out your back door through this little courtyard area and then into your detached garage. But your detached garage is essentially a bank of garages that runs up and down the alley. Also, it allows for in duplex cases and also in single families in these developments, where if you want to build a garage that is attached to your neighbor's garage, you can, as long as they're built at the same time, you can do that as well. Now, allowing allowing for duplexes makes a lot of sense because the houses are connected anyway. But we're also wrote this to where it would also could be done in these new subdivisions, where if you have a detached garage and you have a single family home, that your garage could be attached to the neighbors. I just want to point that out as a little bit out of what we've done in the past. So I just want to make sure that you understand and you're clear with that.
Wait a
And
minute, go back over that again. You said where you can have detached houses.
two single family detached houses, not attached to one another.
Right,
You have an alley in the back.
right.
Back with the alley, you have a detached garage,
Okay.
not attached to the house,
Right.
but you're allowed to attach the two garages together along the property line.
Okay. That, I just wanted to.
Think duplex garage.
I got you. That's what I was getting at. If they're detached
Detached from the house,
from the
attached
house.
to the neighbor's
So,
garage.
yeah, okay. I got you.
And I'm writing this stuff to be as flexible as possible. I really don't think it's going to be real popular with the developers. But I'm trying to write, what I want to do is I want to write these things that are flexible enough. So we don't come back later and somebody didn't say, somebody had a great idea, let's put it in. If nobody uses it, nobody uses it. If you have a problem with it, it's easy enough to pull out. I'm not married to it one way or the other. But I put it in to be flexible.
It gives the property owner a little more yard.
It will.
Yeah,
And it doesn't just allow you to go build a garage right on the property line. It has to be built at the same time, presumably at initial construction,
Mhm.
with the adjoining garage.
Right.
All right, change 3. Language needs to be added that exempts lots built facing open space from the provisions that lots without public street frontage cannot have houses built onto them. So we're adding a new disclaimer. There is a provision in the zoning ordinance that we have some lots scattered around the city that don't front on a public street, either front on an improved alley or an unimproved alley. The zoning ordinance says that you can't build a house on those. So we had to craft in there a workaround, knowing that we're going to be developing these designing these developments that allow them to front on the open space. Technically, they would fall under that exception. They don't have a public street frontage, therefore you can't build on them. And all this is creating an escape valve for that. Everybody okay?
Mhm.
Number 4, page 418, language is needed to define what a front yard setback is. And that's not a change. Basically, all it says is if the architectural front of your house is facing an open space, the property line that's adjoining the open space is measured for your front setback. Pretty much common sense. Change 5. Structures to have access. Again, we have another provision in there. There's a couple of different places throughout Articles 4 and 5 that say that you can't build on lots that don't front of public streets. So we had to craft workarounds on those. Change 6. Change reference to rear yard parking being preferred to expected. This will encourage use of alleys where they already exist and give more validity to the commission's and ordinances expectations that new subdivisions be more historically urban character. And we need to get rid of, when you use weasel words like preferred, it makes it very hard to enforce. Okay, thank you for preferring it, now approve my permit. So we're putting more direct language in here. Basically, we're changing, it says rear yard parking garages or parking pads are the expected off-street parking system. And there are built-in exemptions to that. So that puts us in a position where if somebody up on Oak Hill Avenue, Hamilton Boulevard, the Terrace, or the Terrace does have a lot of on-street front driveways, but places around the city where the configuration is if you have off-street parking, it's in your rear and you can do it, you shouldn't be creating new driveways in places where they're not characteristic, essentially. That, okay, you have the ability to put, you want a parking pad, fine, but if you have the ability to put it off the alley, you're expected, not preferred, expected to do that. Number 7, provide a clear statement that traditional,
Before we go any further,
yeah,
I'm okay with being inspected, but what if there is no alley?
then obviously we can't do that. If you have the ability to do it, you do it, but if you don't have the ability, if there's no alley, then it doesn't apply.
Okay, let me,
Maybe it would be useful to make that clear in paragraph B.
It may be already, because it might be one of the pieces there that I left out as being unchanged. Hold on one quick second. The parking area shall be solid paved surfaces or permanent pavers. 2, rear yard parking garages where parking pads are the expected off-street parking system. 3, driveways accessing lot on the front or side street shall be 1 vehicle width. 4, driveways serving front loaded garages shall be permitted to be as wide as the garage.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. For lots without garages and without the ability to provide rear yard parking, i.e. you don't have an alley. Front yard parking pads are maybe permissible provided parking area does not exceed 50% of the yard front lot. So we got it covered.
Okay.
All right.
now, what if you have a subdivision with large lots? And you didn't put a garage in when you built your house? And you decided, well, I want to put a garage in, but I don't want to put it in my back yard where I got to, because I don't have a driveway and have to drive all the way around. And you decide to put it on one side of your house, attached, say the house is here, and you decide to add the garage down a driveway on the side of the house and put the garage back here and have it turn in like that.
Where's your existing driveway?
There's no driveway.
There's no driveway on the property.
No driveway on the property at all.
Does it back up to an alley?
That's what I said, no alley. There's no alley.
Well, then you're gonna have to be able to get it off of the front or side street at that point.
You know, that's what I'm saying. So I'm talking about a detached house now, not attached.
Right.
One that has a lot large enough that you can put a single or even a 2-car garage in there. But what you're doing is you're putting it in, because I've seen these, and you just drive down the side of the house and turn in.
And the only way you get to it is from the front.
From the front.
Side street, because
There's no alley, yeah.
Then I think you're okay at that point. But if you have an alley and the alley is accessible, you're expected to use the alley.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, would this be a situation where you have an exception?
It's already built in.
It's already built in, okay.
Number 7, page 5-22, this is in the subdivision land development ordinance. Provide a clear statement that traditional street layouts are the priority form. Again, this is changing the weasel words from preferred into expected or priority. Language will now be priority designs are rectilinear streets, etc. And then you have further development, and this kind of gets back to some of the conversation we had earlier about the width of the alleys. It will now read as follows. Alleys are a predominant Hagerstown feature, and the use of alleys is generally expected in new subdivisions to allow for vehicle parking to the rear of properties, to provide additional connectivity, increase available on-street parking, allow for more discreet and manageable trash collection, and to improve the pedestrian orientation of primary streets by reducing or eliminating curb cuts. Alleys may be either public or private. Private alleys shall be owned and maintained by a homeowners association. Alleys dedicated to and accepted to the city shall be constructed to city standards. that gets into the expectations for that one.
So does that mean that if they're not built to city, I mean, if they're not gonna be dedicated, that they might not have to have 16-foot width, for example?
If they're not built to city standards, the city engineer has said that they are willing to be flexible depending on the individual circumstances on how they design them. As long as
In
they're,
terms of the surface, concrete versus blacktop.
yeah. But I think there is going to be a standard. There's going to be there will be a settling on certain widths in order to ensure fire access and trash
Is the
access.
city gonna require concrete alleys as part of?
That's the current standard. City engineers taking a look at that.
Everybody's okay, moving on to 8. Add alleys to the street plan requirement. Basically, it's just a minor tweaking of the chart of things that are required to be shown in the sketch plan. We add alleys to as a kind of a reminder. And also, they're not, for some reason, the chart doesn't show these items, street plan containing the following, as a requirement of a sketch plan. So we're adding if you see the red X on top of page 5, generally depicted. Again, it's a sketch plan. The generalized plans are not heavily engineered at that point. But now this makes it really clear that you're expected to put your street plan in general on your sketch plan, not that they aren't already. Change 9, clarify that the alleys to be dedicated to the city will be built to city standards without exception, and but provide more flexibility for those to be retained by a homeowners association. So we put language in there that says any alley that may be dedicated to the city for ownership and maintenance shall be constructed to city standards without exception. Do you expect us to take it if you're building it the way we're telling you to?
Well, interestingly, I mean, the city, most of the alleys I'm familiar with are probably dedicated to the city. The city has never accepted them. Like, for example, my neighborhood, and the city doesn't maintain them. Now, it's good that they're made of concrete, because basically they can get away with no maintenance at all ever. Whereas macadam, you have to do something eventually. But the city doesn't have any intention, I take it, of assuming responsibility for taking over maintenance alleys.
The actual, if the alley were to break down, these are public alleys that we have in the old part of the city. The city would fix it, because the city doesn't allow old alleys. But when the alley, if it becomes a complete shamble area, it would wind up in the CIP to be repaired.
Oh, no.
And one piece of information on that I was made aware of by the Director of Public Works is one of the reasons why we don't plow alleys is because of how they're designed. They're designed like this.
Mhm.
Try to run a snow plow on that. I didn't even know that until we told me.
Because that way the water flows
Water
down.
runs out of the yards,
Down the center.
down the alley, yeah.
On one hand, it's being used for stormwater management. Bottom line is it's poor design for plowing snow.
Yeah.
So. Change 10, open space, specifically lay out the conditions under which lots can be created fronting open space with public parks without being required to plant public streets. So we had a language, this is not new from what you saw before. We did settle on 300 feet as the maximum distance. If it's fronting on an open space, maximum distance of 300 feet from public streets. And when we had our meeting last week, we had some examples where there's a proposed subdivision design. There's a block of street, 2 blocks of street. One is 600 feet long, the other one's 800 feet long. And the way that laid out, 600 feet long, the house's majority would be 300 feet from one direction, 300 feet from the other. That meets the requirement. The other longer block would have to stay at a street rather than but nothing in that, if I recall, is new language.
Okay with this group?
And we think that will take care of it.
2108. No.
You want to do it? The This is signage. They've already gone through this.
Yeah, I'm just trying to move it along. But I got into some stuff that we need to talk about, and I
Yeah.
thought that,
This
take it
is,
over.
yeah, this particular item, just so that you're aware, when you get the final version of it in at your next meeting, I was kind of in a rush. I mean, this is not quite formatted the same as the rest with change number 1, change number 2. It will be. Nothing of content, but it'll structurally look a little bit different when you see the final product. But this talks about the various things that were in your discussion at the last meeting. Unfortunately, the last meeting, the audio was pretty distorted, and I had a hard time working my way through it. I think I got everything that you wanted. We talked about allowing roof-mounted signs as long as they're more than 10 feet off the in height off the roof.
Can I talk about that?
Sure, go ahead.
I think we want to allow one roof-mounted sign per side of the building. As long as that side does not face residentially zoned land. I mean, what's the use of putting a sign on northbound traffic can see and not one for southbound traffic to see?
I guess it's a little bit.
Right, so I would ask that we change that to say one roof-mounted sign is allowed per side, building side, as long as that side does not face a residentially zoned land.
Discussion. The expectation was that that sign would be considered part and parcel of the other wall-mounted sign on the building. You allow more than one roof sign. Not to say they have to do it, but if we go with that standard and you're going to have 2 or 3 signs, it's going to kill your wall sign area real quick.
Yeah.
And
It's their
they're okay with
choice.
that, they're okay with that.
So it's their choice. If they want to put one on the roof, then they sacrifice the ones down, on the sides.
Okay.
And again, I'm thinking, what you would see, this would be for a major building, but PNC, they could have it on the wall, but then they don't have anything down below. So
Are you thinking about the one up on Mosford Park?
yeah,
And that one, it actually, using your standard, that building would be allowed to have 3 roof-mounted signs because it backs up to,
right,
Portland, what's it?
Manor.
Portland Manor?
residential area.
Manor.
Portland Manor.
So
So that, if that was new, let's say there were no roof-mounted signs on that building, then the sign could not be more than 10 feet off of the cornice. I don't know whether the current one does or does not, or the ones, because there's 4 on the building. And the one facing Portland would not be permitted.
Right,
You would have 3 on that building,
right,
as many as 3.
right. This is a sign that's going to be announcing the purpose of this building. This is IBM's building. This is somebody's significant use of that building, or it's their building. You get naming rights, you pay for it.
Yeah.
We don't need to put that on a residential side. We don't need lit. I mean, years ago, I strongly opposed lighting the sheet store that was going in on Eastern that was going to be facing the residential area. And I still stand by that. So there's no sense to having that bright red light or blue light or white light shine in someone's bedroom windows. But there's no reason why it can't be on the other sides facing the roads or whatever else to announce the building. If you're going to put it on one side, again, depending upon the orientation of the building, most of them are perpendicular to the roads. But on one side, you want to put them on the other side. So anyway,
And what if the building is like a strip shopping center or something like that, where you have multi-tenants?
well, they only get one now. I mean,
So basically, first come, first served, which again,
That's the landlord, that's the developer's problem.
That's fine. I want to make sure.
We're
clear.
saying, yeah, they're gonna go back to a monument sign, which is allowed,
Okay.
and they will have a building top sign.
So it would be per building,
Elevation.
per elevation.
For elevation.
And maybe at the end of it, a new sentence that says roof mounted signs shall not be permitted on elevations facing adjoining residential zone plan.
One addition. I've seen them where the signs have been on a building facing a road like this. But instead of being square to the sides, they're canted. So you have one sign that's really a V. So you can see it from both directions.
That's too solid.
So that's two signs. But it's connected now. It's not. I'm asking the question because I can see it being done because I've seen it done.
Two faces.
Okay.
So that is message too similar to the same message. You have section 1, section 2, does it say Coca-Cola or is it Coca-Cola?
Coca-Cola. Two signs. I'm just asking the question because I can see that coming up.
I think the staff has recognized this, and I certainly have tried to tell us a long time. You cannot tie down ordinances on signs. They will be a way.
Somebody's going to
Someone's
figure
gonna come
a way
in
to.
here
Yep.
with some innovative way.
Yep.
That's going to cause headaches. The
You don't
tighter
want-
you get,
You don't want to hear the other one I had.
signs are,
New language that we also put in that is addressing checking signs that are not fronting, fronts of buildings. Typically, projecting signs are really, for the most part, you're going to be seen downtown, there may be some exceptions. So we have, on page 3, we have the maximum permitted number of projecting signs, not include those mounted interior to the site, such as in the back of a building where there is no public street frontage, in a courtyard, in a pedestrian alley between buildings and properties, in similar situations not generally visible from public streets. Excluded from permitted maximums above, provided that they are mounted at a doorway, providing access to the use of the sign advertisements. To give you an example, something like this, the Oldenberry building that, and the Walker building, or the Walker and behind them, they have doors to businesses, they have parking back there. It's a door of an entrance to a business that happens to be in that space. What's the harm?
no,
Arts Council.
you know,
And I had made a recommendation to the answering number 1, which was to make a modification to the chart to say that if, because we've had this happen downtown where multiple individual buildings were put on a single lot, and that we should allow each building to get the projecting sign instead of treating all 3 as only one and you only get the one. So that was something I supported.
Yeah. And I'm good with that. I think we just need to be careful with the wording, because technically they're all one big building. We might use the word facade or something like that, just to be clear.
why are they one building?
Because they're all on one property and they're all connected. You can walk interior from one to the other, one big building.
There's original exterior wall and original exterior wall, right?
Which is reached and you can walk.
But if you tear down that one, you could tear it down without harming the other.
Not the Pimmick Walk. Pimmick Walk, if you walk in the front of the Pimmick Walk, that side wall is the side wall of the Masonic Lodge. They basically just built a roof between the Masonic Lodge and
okay.
the Tri-State building.
But combining so many of them on one lot was done for the fire code, so that they could share fire access. And you couldn't have done that if they were on separate lots for the code. So that's why in that circumstance, the Masonic Temple was added to the lot for the other 2 buildings or 3 buildings, so that they could be sharing elevators and fire escapes. And it would be because it's all in one property.
From my perspective, if you're using the word building, that's all one building. I mean, we're talking vocabulary here. I think we're all on the same sheet. We've got to find the right word to use.
Okay.
So. And under flush wall mounted signs and roof mounted signs, that additional column maximum cumulative area more than 500 feet of wall. The last version that you saw only had the bottom box filled in 3 per linear foot of frontage. All I did was I added a duplication of the column to the left just so that it had a complete chart. It doesn't change. Just but as far as stuff that you did not see before, that is it. And then number 2, again, I'm not sure how this played out in the discussion, allow up to 36 square feet of projecting signs for upper floor tenants and any number of brackets rather than a maximum of 1 sign, or allow up to 36 square feet on a certain maximum number of brackets. All generated this for the office uses.
Yeah, we were seeing like 3 projecting signs on a single bracket system, but altogether it met the 36 square foot. I think it's wrong with that.
You're okay with that? Gretchen? That's all I have on that. And then we have one last issue, which was the last memo that was in the packet. We ran into a situation recently of a property that was built as a block of 3 townhouses. At some point, 2 of the units were combined into 1 and clearly used as a combined dwelling. It was in space. There was archways that were broken through what would have been the party wall on both the first and second floor of the building. So essentially it is, although architecturally it looks like from the front street, it looks like 3 townhouses. It's for all intents and purposes. Purchased this particular example this year on the mistaken understanding that they could get building permits to restore the whole thing to 3 townhouses. I had to tell them that they could not do that, that it was limited to 2 because it's essentially a non-conformity based on this lot size and everything. And it basically, by converting the 3 into 2, it brought the property closer into performance. You can't go back the other direction. It's caused these folks some significant distress. There aren't many of these buildings around.
There's a few.
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of them, but there's a few. I know there's a few. How many of them have passes under that? I have no idea. It's the answer is 0, other than this one. Problem is, and the question is should we allow these situations to be allowed to go back to what they were originally constructed as? And as far as consistency within the ordinance, we have a little bit of a problem because you have similar situations with duplexes around the town where people went and they had converted a duplex into a single family home. And now the property does not have a lot of lot area to do a duplex for their particular zoning district. And in the last 18 years, I have told people on more than one occasion, sorry, you're stuck with it being a single family home. Somebody converted it, it's now single. You can't go back the other direction into non-conformity. And I'm thinking there's probably, just because of the nature of the beast in this town being a very heavily developed duplex environment, there's probably a lot of those around. So the question here is, oh, and let me back up for a second. We do have a provision in the non-conforming use section that says if you have a duplex and it's sat vacant, and it's a duplex that's on an undersized lot, in other words, you couldn't build a duplex on it today, and it's sat vacant entirely for 2 years, then its non-conformity obviously is lost because it's non-conforming use and they go away if not used for 2 years. We have a provision in the non-conforming section saying, if it hasn't been converted to a single-family home, it's still in its original configuration as a two-family dwelling. The 2-year expiration doesn't apply. You can go get building permits, occupancy permits, renovate the building, and still have the two that it's physically, exteriorly, and interiorly, structurally still configured as two, even though it had been over the 2 years non-conforming period. So that's a little bit different, because these are where somebody went and actually performed work to reduce the number of dwelling units. How many of these are we going to get going from 3 to 2? This may be the only one, probably will be. But it kind of, if we're going to be consistent with the ordinance, should we be doing it? Shouldn't we be doing it going from 2 to 1? And there's a potential for a lot more of those around.
And then the-
I think it makes sense because we have a ton of these. And the fact that the code we adopted after they were all built makes them all non-conforming seems a little crazy to me. That we're going to say, all right, when you built these, because most of our duplexes are undersized for what the code requires. The code is more suburban than what our older two-family homes were built at. And I don't think that the code should make it impossible to maintain those. Or if someone did something like combined it to two, why it couldn't go back to what it was probably for the first 50 years of its life, which was a two-family home. So that, to me, it feels like, I think this makes sense. The buildings that were built as a triplex or townhouse should be able to go back to. I feel the same way about duplexes.
I agree. I was going to say that. I think that's, if it was built that way originally, it should be allowed to go back to that way originally.
And I don't have strong opinions on it one way or the other. I just want to make sure the ordinance is consistent. But to point out an example, like you have some of these houses on Locust Street, which you had 2 very small units combined into one now modest or reasonable size unit. We're going to be telling them that they can go back and put a party wall in there and put it back to 2 tiny units.
Yeah, it was built that way originally.
Right. There's
Now,
a
you
need
can't
for
take-
small
You
houses.
can't take a building and it was built for 1 or 2 residents and make 10 residential units out of it. I know. But you can go take it back to the original intent, I think. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
But there's a need for, smaller, even smaller houses than what we would expect, price wise and for use wise. So if they're
The
built
the
that
only-
way.
The only thing I would be concerned about if they did that transition, how they, I guess, how did they combine the utilities in it? And did they keep, or did they do away with the original house number for one of the units, or did they keep both of the addresses?
I think you could have any number of combinations of these circumstances for particular properties. You could have buildings that still out there look like a duplex, 2 front doors, but inside the house,
Yeah,
they broke through the party wall, reconfigured the rooms, and you can go one from one side to the other, but from the exterior, it has 2 front doors.
I got a good one for you. My wife and I, when we got married, we were looking for a place to rent. And we were in a house, I forget where it was, and we were in there talking to the lady, and all of a sudden, this little girl came walking out of the closet. Somebody had gone into the closet and put a door between the connected houses. We were sitting in there, and all of a sudden, she just comes walking in.
I think I've dealt with a couple of these, like over in the West Washington Street area, or Washington Square, places like that. Down in the CCMU here doesn't really affect anything because there are no setbacks, there's no lot area in the CCMU, so the downtown, it's really not an issue. Where you're gonna find it is in the older, much more established, closer into the center residentially zoned areas such as Locust Street, the
South
West
End
End.
is packed with duplexes.
Yeah, South End, West End,
We,
Locust Street area, that kind of thing.
I remember we had a case, a house on Hope Avenue.
Yep.
That came in here with this.
3 units.
It was 3 units. It was the weirdest thing.
Yep. Well, there, that one was, originally it was built with property lines. No, they decided to subdivide it. And so they had to run the property line kind of follow a low ground wall, but it wasn't a straight line.
It was 3 units, if I remember correctly, it was 3 units built on 2 lots. So you had a property line that ran through the center unit of the building.
Yes. I remember
So they,
those.
because there were 3 units there, they re-subdivided the 2 to 3 lots, running those funky property lines through the 2 interior property wall.
And those 3 lots were way too small. Then.
Yeah,
But
But I
eventually
agree
that
with
burned down.
I remember that.
I agree with the
Yes.
principle though, that
Right.
if they were built that way, they ought to be able to go back to that.
Yeah, I think so too.
And true, there may be unique problems with each
Yeah.
one about how you do electric service, but those
Yeah,
are,
but that's-
those are all
yeah,
things that'll have to be solved. I mean, you're not gonna,
Yeah,
Those are things that we deal with now. If someone wants to subdivide a duplex, you've got to make sure you've got a firewall, you've got to
Yeah.
make the utility company happy. So yeah, those are things when we're creating just a semi-detached into a property line down the middle, there's changes they're gonna have to make if they want to do this.
Right.
yeah,
And I'm gonna need to look through the ordinance a little bit to make sure that there aren't any trip ups in there. For example, we have minimum lot area or minimum square footage requirements for a new dwelling unit based on the number of bedrooms. Someone has to have to work around for that in
well,
order
but
to
this
go
is
back to
not,
the original.
I wouldn't call that a new dwelling unit.
You have to. I mean, if you had a building that's been converted into a house, a single family unit, and you're bringing it to 2 dwelling units, that's definitely.
Well, but it originally was 2 dwelling units, so I wouldn't look at that as a new dwelling unit.
I respectfully disagree.
Well,
I
then,
think you'd have to do it, Steve, or like these may not meet it and they
How
they
they're gonna
never
meet it?
could. but
how
they
are they
were
gonna
built
meet
this
all
way.
kinds of code
Right.
requirements? I mean, you
Yeah.
really have to be able to treat it as if it was free to begin
It's
with.
gonna be
to where it
non-conforming.
was.
It's not non-conforming if it doesn't exist anymore. If you've broken through and have been using the space as a single family
No,
home,
no,
we're arguing 2 different
I think-
angles of the same direction we
Right.
want to go. I understand what you want to do. All I'm saying is, I just need to look at the language a little bit, just to make sure that we can get there from here. We all want to get there. I just got to make sure we have ministry. I just can't buy that. We can get there. I'll craft the necessary language to make it happen. All right. That's all I got. So it sounds like we just have a couple of things that we need to address here, like 3 or 4 things. You'll have your official,
Plus, we'll let you know what happens with the fire truck
Yes.
meeting and the homeless meeting,
yes.
or the unhoused. Meeting.
Just whatever, we just gotta make sure we got it right.
And if you're okay with everything, anything that we're gonna change, I think at the next meeting will be very, very minor. And hopefully we should be able to.
At the workshop today, was it yesterday? Calvert County was talking yesterday, one,
It's today.
and they said, this is Calvert County Planning Commission, was going to be provided iPads.
That was yesterday.
So I immediately go, ooh, and I fired off an email. I think you all saw. You know, Calvert County's getting iPads. But, and then Kathy came back about some committee that she's going to submit to some committee, apparently, which I didn't know about. I knew there was something going on, but all this new federal money that's flowing. Not being facetious. And listening to some of these counties, the larger counties, Anne Arundel County, Howard County, and Prince George's County, and what they do with in generating and doing new comprehensive plans. We haven't had a consultant come in to do a comprehensive plan. I know we're a couple years out, we need to do one. Be nice to take some of this chunk of this money, if possible, to bring a consultant back in. If we can set it aside for a couple of years, whenever it's needed. No,
Can't set it aside, you have to spend it within a certain
Use
period
it or
of time.
lose it.
But I have been thinking in the back of my head that we might need help updating the WRE if we're gonna try to do these modifications to the MRTA. do that analysis.
Well, personally, I would like to go.
So, so one thing that came up today, in one of the sessions about climate change, and I do think it was Calvert County. Was it Calvert?
What thing?
Climate change.
Yeah, that was Calvert County.
You know, one of the questions, the poll questions that was asked of the attendees is how many of you have incorporated the realities of this into your planning documents? I couldn't answer the question. And it's not for a discussion tonight, but I'm wondering how much we would have to do, you know, in the future, taking in that reality.
Were they talking about sea rise or what were they talking about with climate change?
Well, I mean, so you already started like with the impervious surface thing. And as somebody who has nearly 12,000 square feet on her property and is meeting with the city on Friday to talk about how to mitigate that, it's uppermost in my mind, but you know, climate change is not just rising sea level. It's everything that goes with that. It's the heavy rain and the runoff and the storms and you know, what do you do about plantings and just regular erosion? And so it's more complicated than that. You know, luckily we're not facing the bay, but we will experience those effects. So
What can the city of Hagerstown not avoid doing that would exasperate climate change? What can we do to do our part for the good of the world? Now, Chris, you know, but there's certain things that we can do. You know, we do plant trees, but maybe more trees. That kind of stuff. So, but that would be just occurring during our next comprehensive plan.
right.
I don't see that as trying to do initiatives between now and then.
No, but I think we have to look at it from that perspective. And
There is a lot more of that kind of stuff in this current plan than we've had in the past. That last environmental chapter really got beefed up in the 2000 when Alex was writing it in 2015. Plan was adopted in 2018.
it might be good to have a consultant for that because, you know, we're a rural farming community with a, you know, a city in the middle of it in the county. And we have needs that are going to be different than perhaps what people would think would need.
I just think we need a consultant to come back. We've done it, what, 2 years ourselves, 2 years in-house, 1 year? Well, that's not horrible.
No,
But
but
at some point, we need that
Basically
outside.
did an in-house update of the 2008 plan.
Okay, that's
Got
what
adopted in 2018.
I feel we need someone coming to us with new, fresh ideas, with new eyes. They could say, have you considered doing this? Those kinds of things.
What would be helpful is if the state made the ARC money more flexible again for planning. In all of the prior comp plans that we did, I think all of them, we got ARC planning money. And all we did was we would say to the Maryland Department of Planning, we would like to get some of that money, and they would say, okay. And so we funded the 2008 mostly with that kind of money, the one before that, the 97, the one before the 88. But they, I don't know, like 9 or so years ago, they said, we're no longer doing it that way. Now it's got to go in the capital money. And the capital money, the way that gets reviewed is we ask the county to rank us nicely, and then Tri-County Council decides how to spend the money. And the city of Hagerstown doesn't rank very well because the county's projects get a higher priority in the county's ranking. And so we stopped trying to chase the planning money because we knew it's difficult for us to get that ARC money for capital. Planning was going to be tricky. It was so much easier when the state had a certain amount of that ARC money set aside for planning, and the city could go directly to the state and say, we'd like some planning money. And they
ARC.
changed it.
ARC stands for Appalachian.
Appalachian Regional Commission.
Can you write up something on that for me? There you go.
I sent a kind of a broadside to MVP today about that anyway, because they sent out a WR, Water Resource Element Guidance Update document about what new requirements they wanted to pass on for comp plans to make the WRE even more technical. And it's a document like this, and I had to keep Googling the terms to see, can I even find this stuff that they want us to include? And finally said, there is no way in hell Hagerstown could ever do this. When we have a department of 3 generalist planners that are not environmental technical people. We could not do it. We don't have the money to hire people. It used to be great when we had the ARC money. So I kind of threw that out there, you know, if you could bring that back, then we could hire some.
Who'd you address that to?
It was to Jason Dubois or Dubois is the one who sent it to us, and he copied a couple of people from MDE and another person from MDC. So they all heard mine, you've got to be kidding, response about how in the world, because we're a 43,000 person city,
Yeah.
and we only have 3 planners.
Yeah.
What are all the other municipalities that are so much smaller than us?
Yeah.
And the ones that are comparable sizes to us have much larger staffs than we do. If you compare us to like Frederick, Annapolis, Bowie, Rockville, Gaithersburg.
But they have greater property values.
But they have similar populations and similar sizes.
And this is stuff that's regulated in the department. This is not stuff that the legislature is pushing down on them.
I don't know what's motivating this document change, but it was, I was just like, oh, Lord.
Maybe I could talk to Joe, maybe get Chuck involved, but I don't know, but
I can
I,
forward that document to you if you want to see
Yeah.
what they want, and it's pretty unbelievable.
I'd like to,
It seems like a team of, students from the University of Maryland and their environmental professors should be, working on this stuff, not asking Funkstown or Keysville or Williamsport or Fort Hagerstown to try to figure out how to do it.
yep, or Hancock.
Bet you somebody is though.
Even most of the rural counties, they would be hard pressed. And to convince their commissioners to spend tax dollars on planning people.
That theme is something I preach a lot on the exec committee level, is that you guys are much bigger. You got to start thinking about how can we help the Williamsports and how can we help the Hancocks? Because they're the ones who really struggle. So.
There's a lot of municipalities in Maryland, and most of them are teams. They're lucky if they have a part-time planner.
Yeah.
Some of them
It's,
just a town clerk.
we got a presentation from Leonardtown.
Mhm.
The city manager is it.
That's
She
right.
has a mayor, but she is it. She does everything.
And they did
Oh.
amazing things.
Yeah, she's doing amazing things. But, how can she respond to that? I mean, it's these small entities that are getting pounded, and we can see it too. But I just still getting back to what I would like to see is all possible, some way that we could have an outside consultant come in to help us at least. At that time, I don't know how many more years we got.
2028 plan.
Okay. But then maybe we can get somebody's head knocked and get some money. I don't know. Just, I think we need that. And if we're going to have a good plan. I mean, we can generate a plan, I'm sure. Nothing against staff, but it's just us. You all more than us, but anyway. But we're part of it. So anyway, I just think that needs to be. And we hadn't had great outside consultants in the past, but they are out there.
What's the last one we had?
Well, he was innovative,
WRE.
yeah.
Well, Leonardtown had a good consultant
Yes.
to supplement the town administrator.
Okay.
All right, I think we're done.
All right.